everyone, my name is Chan and these are my teammates Faz, Chin and Yip. And today we are going to present on the topic reduce the consumption of processed food. So a global study suggests that the unhealthy food are the most promoted item in the supermarket all around the world, and consumers are attracted to the most cheapest and the most readily available food such as processed food. So what is processed food? Processed food is referred to the food that are packaged in box, can and bags. And nevertheless, processed food is anything that has been altered from its natural state. So how can we differentiate between processed food and the real food? We can actually determine whether it is a processed food by looking at the ingredient list. The longer the ingredient list is, the more processed food is likely to be. Okay. So at most, 80% of the population are consuming processed food, and 70% of them are affected by the impact produced by processed food. So there you can see that only 30% of people survive out of 80% of people are consuming processed food. So this one, according to the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Malaysia has a packaged food industry worth 5.5 billion in 2011, led by dry processed food, dairy product and bakery, and it is forecast to grow to 5.9 billion by 2016. In this statistic, we can note that actually Malaysian people are pushing themselves to any age of disease created by processed food. We always mention we want to live long, but when the way we consume the processed food, we are inserting illness into our mouth. So I'm here to convince you guys to reduce the consumption of processed food. So as we know, processed food has been altered from its natural state, and the components they use to produce the processed food are likely to be chemical substance. Nowadays, people like you and me care so much of our skin and look, but when the time we consume too much of processed food, we are actually destroying the beauty that we care the most. So if you are constantly eating processed food, you are destroying your own skin. So this will be the examples of the skin problem. And the example of skin problem is the first one, this one is psoriasis, and this one is eczema, this one is rosacea, and this one is acne. In this slide, we can note that actually the bread, white rice, and pasta are considered as high glycemic index diet. Okay, researchers compile a growing body evidence that if you consume too much of high glycemic index diet, you are putting yourself in an acne flare-up. So, a paper published in the Academic of Journal of the Diabetes also state that if you consume too much of high glycemic index diet, it will cause that rapid spike in the blood sugar and directly linked to the inflammation in body. If you consume too much of processed food, you actually lead yourself to sagging skin and any kind of skin disease. And severe skin problem can experience in low self-esteem and impact negatively in our quality of life. So if you often intake bread, white rice, and pasta, you are getting one step closer to the skin problem. And also, in this slide, we can see that actually artificial colorings are more related to synthetic compound, and also artificial colorings have been proved to cause hypersensitive reaction in any kind of skin condition such as urticaria and atopic dermatitis. So the effect of all these skin disease may take a very long time to cure or even does not have the remedies to recuperate. So if you are aware of your skin problem, start to reduce the consumption of processed food from now. And now I will pass it to Faz.
Thank you, Chen. Okay, so now I'll continue by talking about obesity. In the world, poverty is associated with malnutrition and underweight. However, in middle-income countries like Malaysia, it has an increased risk of obesity. According to British Medical Journal, Malaysia has an obesity rate of 45.3%, and that is nearly half of Malaysia's population. As we all know, obesity is always related to the food intake, and Malaysia has no exceptions as food is always available in Malaysia, especially processed foods. So Malaysians should train themselves into reducing the consumption of processed food, because processed food contains cheap, non-nutritive fillers, artificial ingredients, and synthetic chemical additives that not just cause obesity but also promotes cancer cells. Most of the processed food is not food in its conventional meaning, because food is a source of energy and nutrition. But nowadays, processed food does not provide us with enough nutrition, and it may kill you if its intake is excessive. And terms like fat-free and all-natural, it's often slapped on these food items, that may not be healthy at all. So to make it clear, processed food are just illusions that claim to be healthy, but they make us sick and fat. Research shows about 70% of a person's calorie comes from processed food. People are gaining weight often because of their processed food cycle, and people eating regularly empty on calories food such as croissants, triangle sandwiches made with white bread, and also sugary bars that are not good for health. And as more refined the food is, the more risk we would face later, and the more pleasure we tend to seek, but then we have to stop. This trend should be brought to a halt. Besides, processed foods are very addictive. Because of the overload of fat and salt in it, it causes us to crave for it again and again. So all processed food also contains refined fructose, primarily in the form of high fructose corn syrup, that stops our brain from stimulating hormonal signals that tells us to stop eating. So this is a major factor in the recipe for obesity. So processed food also gives us excess sugar, which converts into fatty acids that stores fats in our hips and stomach, leaving us looking fat. That is horrible. And so if a yogurt is low fat, but if it's full of sugar, so it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any differences. And besides, do you know that the lovely color on a strawberry yogurt is extracted from carmine from beetles after being squished and crushed? And then calories from processed food are not easy to burn, because the calories from wholesome foods are 50% easier to burn. Processed food contains lots of chemical additives and fats and refined sugar and salt in it that causes it not easier to burn. And the best example would be the drink we ordered together with a slice of pizza, carbonated drinks. It is loaded with sugar and also a lot of chemical additives in it. That is not easy to burn at all. And lastly, the obesity has a lot of impacts. It's a very chronic disease because it leaves us with heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, fertility problems, and so on. So we should make smarter food choices in order to avoid the health costs later in your life. So next, I'll pass it on to Wan Xuan.
So if you are a frequent consumer of processed food, you must also be aware of the risk of heart-related disease. The statistics shown by the American Heart Association has shown that 2.3 million of people have died from heart-related disease due to consuming too much of processed food, which is high in the sodium content. This is around 15% of all the deaths caused by heart disease. And you know the Malaysian Adult Nutrition Survey in 2003 showed that the sodium intake by Malaysia was 2,575 milligram, which is 29% higher than the daily sodium limit set by the Malaysian Dietary Guideline, which means you might be one of them who exceed your daily sodium intake. Processed food contain one of the highest sodium level for flavouring and preservative purpose. And a high sodium intake will generally lead you to high blood pressure, and eventually you will be one of them who suffer from heart disease and stroke. The American Heart Association had recommended a limit of 1,500 mg for each of us per day, and where only 500 mg of sodium are required for our body function. Hence, you should reduce your consumption of processed food which exceed this limit. And looking at all this picture, are you one of their consumer? If you are, you must be aware. You must be astounded that how will cereal cause your heart attack. The cereal, a high fiber bowl of cereal with a cup of low-fat milk is a very good healthy way to start your day. However, if you're unaware of your portion size, it could be a start of a high sodium day. The cereal at the farm gate is very low in sodium content. However, the cereal that we get in supermarket, which is after processed, is high in the sodium content. Where a cup of cereal itself can contain 200 mg of sodium, which is high enough to cause your heart disease. The statistic has shown that 95% of our prepared cookies, 100% of crackers, and 80% of our frozen breakfast product contain of a trans fat, which means most of the processed food that you are consuming contain of a trans fat. The trans fat are made up. The trans fat is created through the hydrogenated process of a plant oil and is used to improve taste and texture and their shelf life. Forcing the food manufacturer and restaurant to ban on adding trans fat in processed food will itself save 70,200 lives over the 5 years in England alone. The expert had long warned the risk of using trans fat in causing heart-related disease. As a result of the campaigning, some brands such as the Mars, Kellogg's, and McDonald's had changed their recipe. As big companies such as that can stop adding petroleum substance, so why not we reduce our consumption of processed food for our own betterment? The recommendation trans fat content in the food should be less than 1 gram to be safe to use. Sometimes we might not find the word trans fat in the nutrition content. However, the Food and Drug Administrator had allowed the company to round off 0.5% of trans fat to 0. Hence, food which claims to be trans fat free might still contain of trans fat. If you are a dessert lover, you must also be aware. The cake and muffin mix content is one of the food that contain of high trans fat. Even though it claims to be trans fat free, you might still find the word shortening in the ingredient, where shortening is also a kind of trans fat. 1 tablespoon of shortening itself can contain 1.7 grams of trans fat. And besides, you still need to consider how you are going to top with your cake, usually frosting, and the average serving of frosting contain of 2 grams of trans fat. You might be curious that how would trans fat cause your heart-related disease? The trans fat will increase the low-density lipoprotein and lowering your high-density lipoprotein. The lower the high-density lipoprotein, the higher the risk you will get into heart-related disease. Hence, you should reduce your consumption of processed food in order to reduce this risk. Next, I'll pass it on to analysts.
So, do you know that actually processed food even can lead to cancer as well, apart from the other health problem mentioned by my teammate just now? Therefore, you should reduce the consumption of processed food, especially processed meat. Then why do I say so? Now, let's look at this picture. Do you know that bacon, sausages, ham, salami, as well as canned meat, these food are all falls under processed meat categories. And what is processed meat? Processed meat is generally unhealthy because it has been modified to preserve all flavor by preservatives. Therefore, we should reduce the consumption of processed meat. Now, here are some of the facts from World Health Organization. It says that there are around 34,000 cancer deaths per year are attributed to the diets that's high in processed meat. And besides, they even found that eating 50 grams of processed meat will increase the risk of colorectal cancers by 18%. That's equivalent to 4 slices of bacon and 1 hot dog in a day. Besides, International Agency on Cancer for research on cancer to classify processed meat as carcinogen, which is the substances that cause cancer and falls under group 1. And the food under group 1 normally has the highest possibility of getting cancer, such as this includes salami, bacon, sausages, and hot dogs. Besides, the increasing incidence of colorectal cancers among young adults is very concerning. From American Cancer Society, they state that based on the current trends, they predict that by 2030, people aged 20 to 34 years old will increase by 90% for colorectal cancers. So this has already shown that the colorectal cancer cases are rising among young adults nowadays. But what exactly makes processed food contribute to the rise in colorectal cancer? So, carcinogenic chemicals that form during meat processing include N-nitrosyl compounds. And a lot of research has been done showing that N-nitrosyl compound inside the processed meat are formed from nitrates, which is one of the reasons that cause colorectal cancer. As we all know, processed meat will be preserved before producing into different forms. Therefore, nitrate curing, which is the preservation process, normally use out a lot of salt. Then that's why processed meat are always salty. But have you guys ever realized that this will cause you to have a high intake of salt indirectly? And research has shown that N-nitrosyl compounds in the processed meat will expose you to a larger risk of getting colorectal cancer, which means when you are eating processed meat, you are actually consuming the carcinogenic chemicals as well. Besides, processed food such as ham and bacon are normally cooked under high temperatures. Unfortunately, when nitrates are exposed to heat, it will turn into a harmful compound which called nitrosamines, and which means when you are frying your bacon or grilling your sausages, you are actually eating a lot of nitrosamines together. And this is very concerning because the British Journal of Nutrition have proven that there is a positive association between the consumption of processed meat and the risk of colorectal cancer. Therefore, to avoid getting this cancer, reduce your consumption of processed meat is totally a must. So, why we are here today is persuading you to reduce the consumption of processed meat. By looking at all the statistics, it's not meant for you to totally stop eating, but try to reduce it in other ways. Here are some of the suggested alternative ways. For instance, white rice actually can be replaced by organic brown rice. And squeeze your own fruit juice instead of buying the manufactured fruit juice from the supermarket. And when you're craving for granola bars as a snack, why not you try the nut instead? And lastly, it's very strongly recommended that to buy the fresh meats from market directly and instead of buying processed meat, because this can ensure that what you are really eating is a real meat instead of a fake meat that with a lot of preservatives on it. So, however, for those who really can't avoid processed meat in your daily life, you are strongly recommended to follow the recommended daily limit of consumption by Cancer Research UK, which is reduce your consumption to 70 grams. And on average, normally people will eat 285 grams according to their research. And if you are able to try to reduce your consumption limit to 70 grams, your risk getting cancers is already minimized. So, to sum up all, reduce your consumption of processed meat and get back to the most natural way of eating. So, let's start from today onwards and reduce the consumption of processed food to ensure you to have a healthier lifestyle. So, that's all for our presentation today. Thanks for your attention.